Proud by Henri Rennie. East Ballina 2478. Narrated by Lex Marinos. I was born in Australia, but growing up I somehow deeply knew that this wasn't my nationality. My parents were both survivors of war, who had come to this country, like so many other people, in search of a better life, work, clear skies, health, respect. Their values became my values. Their attitudes, my attitudes. As I grew older, much of that changed. Their enemies didn't have to be my enemies, I realized. I tried to convince my parents that the world had changed, that this was a new country and a new time. To their credit, they tried. It took a lot of years, though, for first-hand knowledge of violence, brutality, death, atrocities to become compartmentalized as the past, and to not flinch at the faces and voices of people who they recognized from the other side of the war. I only had their stories, not my own recollections. The conflict was before my time and in another place. In my youth, there was only one side of the story told, at home and in the media. Balanced reporting hadn't gained much traction and wouldn't for several years. Enough for ideas and impressions to become hardened, attitudes and prejudices too. It was the rapidly changing population of Australia that made the difference for me. As a child, even as a young teenager, most of my social interactions were within my own circle, among my own kind. Those who didn't fit weren't invited in. They had their own circles, and I wasn't welcome there. But eventually I went to work, made it into university, and met people who weren't like me. Met them, and inescapably got to know them. There was a lot of resistance to overcome in my own head. If you look for hostility, you'll find it. Expect animosity, and it'll be there. It's easy to tell yourself that it's not paranoia if they really do hate you. Okay, hate may be too strong a word, but even supposedly good-humoured jibes about a funny accent can sometimes hurt. It took a while before I started to see individuals as individuals. People as people, not shapes with visual characteristics that necessarily meant other, deeper, more intrinsic characteristics. People not like me could be good, funny, clever, charming, nice even. And yes, they could be mean-spirited, violent, greedy or dull, just like some people I'd grown up alongside, quite a few on reflection. But all those traits, good and bad, weren't contingent on race. Upbringing may be, just like I was a product of my upbringing. Sometimes people reacted against their family pressures. I had a close friend raised in a very wealthy, elitist family who shocked and appalled his parents and siblings by going to work as a trade union delegate. So I've tried, really tried, not to generalize or make assumptions, to treat people as I find them, the way I'd hope they'd treat me. It took a few negative experiences, traveling and working, for me to realize that while I'm prepared to treat individuals as I find them, and even to look for the best in them, there are cultures that I'm profoundly uncomfortable with, and people within those cultures who perpetuate those things I find negative, the people who lurk behind stereotypes. Australia gets accused of being a racist country. In some ways it is. Certainly it's a country in which some loudly, aggressively racist people live, and in which there is still some systemic racism. But there are many people here who decry that racism and are trying to change those flawed systems. There's a lot of hurt in Australia, but there's also a lot of shame and an appetite for change. But Australia is an amateur, Asian cultures have a much deeper sense of self and other. Working in Japan as someone who isn't Japanese, there's much more politeness than you'll find in Australia, but it's a veneer. A foreigner, an outsider, is more likely to be sneered at or mocked behind their back than to their face. Respected to the extent of being valuable or useful and no more. Cynical? Probably. It doesn't make it less true, unfortunately. Certainly that's been my experience as I've travelled and worked in Asia. Again, some individuals have been terrific, among the nicest people I've met. The worst of them, truly awful. But the sense of otherness felt ingrained into the institutions themselves and into the fabric of society. The looks on the faces of people on trains, the second not so furtive glance when walking around a marketplace or a shopping centre. Maybe that's a type of paranoia. Expect the worst and never be disappointed. It's made me more comfortable with Australia, though. There might be some individuals who I have a problem with, who have a problem with me or my ethnicity or my pride in my origins, but I've come to believe that they're a minority. Most Australians are pretty tolerant. Most jokes are meant to be funny, not malicious. Not everyone is treated equally, but it's getting better. I am a proud Gaelic man. My origin is Islay, an island off the western coast of Scotland. The end.